Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of 247 DIY. As you can see, I've got the 2012 Forester back up on the lift, and that's because it's finally time to take care of this check engine light once and for all. And that's because I finally went ahead, bit the bullet, and got an OEM manifold to go in the car. And in addition to that, one thing I've been wanting to try now for a while is I've gone ahead and I've picked up this front underbody splash shield off of a turbo model Forester. The non-turbo models just have these two small side pieces. The front end and everything is exposed. Living up here in the Northeast with lots of salt spray on the roads in the wintertime, I figured this might be a cool idea to try and see if it'll fit up underneath there. So we're also going to be tackling that today as well. And before we go ahead and dive into getting this thing replaced, I just want to give a little bit of background in case you're new to the channel and you're curious what I mean by we're finally getting rid of the check engine light. So the manifold that's currently on the Forester, this is an FB25 engine. These early FB25s that originally came out in the Foresters, they had a terrible oil consumption problem. It was a defect from the factory. Subaru acknowledged it. If you caught it within a certain time frame, I believe it's expired now at this point to the date of filming. But for quite a while, if you could show that your oil was consuming too much oil, they would do the oil consumption fix, which was to bring it into the dealership. They'd pull your engine, they'd split the case halves, they would reuse your rotating assembly and just put in revised case halves that don't allow the oil to simply just blow by and out the cylinders. Unfortunately, what that means is you're going to more than likely have a premature failure on your catalytic converters, because catalytic converters, once they're contaminated with oil, will do just that. They're going to fail prematurely. So I started getting a check engine light on this manifold here. This is the original one that came with the car. I'll leave out a whole bunch of nonsense. I'll link a video below where I described and explained the situation I went through with this particular manifold that's hanging right here on the wall. I never had it installed in the car, so I won't bore you with that. I did, however, for quite a while run this manifold right here. This is an aftermarket Inferno Fabrications manifold specifically for the SH chassis Forester, or more importantly, the FB25 engine. It's an absolutely beautifully hand TIG welded manifold, crafted very, very well. Unfortunately, the problem with that is just that the catalytic converter, those are aftermarket manifold or MagnaFlow catalytic converters that he uses on his manifolds. And for some reason in this configuration, they just fail physically. And what I mean by that is they loosen up in the shell and then they start to rattle around, and then it all starts to break up. I actually had this one replaced and the second one, and it began to fail again. At which point I threw this manifold back on the car, because even at the time of removing it, I was only getting a check engine light maybe once a month. It really wasn't the end of the world. At this point now, it's degraded to the point where I'm getting a check engine light coming on about every day, maybe every other day if I'm lucky. And that's not enough time between resetting the check engine lights and being able to have all the monitors ready, which means I'm not going to be able to get the vehicle inspected here in New York in a couple months with that check engine light on. So we needed to get it fixed. For a while, I really didn't want to go ahead and buy a new manifold. These factory manifolds are expensive. Now, you may have seen that there's aftermarket ones out there, some as cheap as like $100, and then some aftermarket well-known brands like Walker that sell them for like $400 to $600, anywhere in that range. The lower end ones, the $100 ones, the $200 ones, they don't last. You can look at the reviews, ask people that have decided to try to save some money and use those. After about a year, they fail. Your check engine light comes back. They just don't use good quality catalytic converters. I decided that I really want to keep this Forester for as long as I possibly can, and it's still running great, no issues, except for the check engine light. So I wanted to just go ahead and get a factory manifold in there. And so there is one important thing to note about these integrated manifolds that have the integrated catalytic converter on them. There's two types. There's the PZEV one and there's the non-PZEV one, and that's mainly a designation that goes on the vehicle. Now this is a PZEV Forester as it was sold here in New York. This is a non-PZEV manifold. Now really what that is on the very face value right up front is just the price difference. This is a $1,200 if I just wanted to go online to a Subaru dealer website and just pay sticker price for it. I've been shopping around. I found a Subaru parts dealer on eBay who had priced this to sell. It's $900. It's not a knockoff or anything. It's got the genuine sticker on it. It's got the genuine laser engraving that brings up the part number there. So it is a genuine manifold, but I saved a couple $100 there, which is nice considering the price of one of these. But if I'm remembering correctly, at the time when I was shopping around and realizing there was two different manifolds, the PZEV designated one is about $3,400, quite a bit steeper than this one here. And the thing about that is the computer in the car, as far as what triggers the check engine lights and stuff like that, doesn't know. It has no idea whether you have a PZEV quality converter in there or just a regular federal regulation quality converter in there. And that's really all that was. The PZEV designated models of Subarus, and I think Ford had some. There might be other manufacturers that did it as well. They're just vehicles that meet the requirements that are quite a bit more strict for, say, California, New York. There might be other states. But in order for those vehicles, brand new, rolling off the lot, to be able to be sold in New York and California, they had to have the PZEV designation. But like I said, the computer in the car doesn't know, and as far as I'm concerned, there's no reason to need to spend $3,400 on a converter if the computer has no way of knowing which one you have in there anyway. So I opted the cheaper route, $900, and I think it was like $950. Here we are, we'll get it replaced. And another thing I should note too, I realized that I may have screwed up initially. I didn't even realize until, honestly, after I bought this converter and I just happened to be doing a little bit of research, I did come across some information that said that these PZEV quality converters actually have a federal warranty of up to 15 years. I didn't know that. I didn't follow through on it to find out whether or not that's true. It's just some information I came across. So I don't know if that's something. I probably could have got this converter replaced for free if that's the case, if there really is a 15-year federal warranty on these. Unfortunately, they would probably want you to bring it to a shop, and the shop would confirm that the converter needed replacing and confirm that they replaced it. Probably not something I'd be able to do on my own, and I really do prefer working on my own vehicles versus bringing them and having someone else work on them. So that's that. Maybe could have saved myself some money, but like I said, I just didn't know that at the time of purchasing this manifold. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this mid-pipe. Honestly, I've never tried to take the manifold down without removing the mid-pipe, so I don't know if it's possible. To me, it just doesn't look possible. It doesn't look the way this is designed with this flange here on the angle that it's on with the studs coming through, that you would be able to get that manifold down without removing the mid-pipe. So at least to save myself some headache with wrestling this and trying to Tetris it out of that small space, I just like to take this whole manifold, or this whole mid-pipe down first. And if you're looking at that and you're curious, no, that's not the stock mid-pipe. That is also the Inferno Fabrications stainless steel catless mid-pipe for the SH Forester. So first we'll undo our spring bolts here at the back end of this mid-pipe. And if your vehicle has any kind of mileage on it, you're probably going to want to pick up an extra set of these just in case. 9 times out of 10, if these have been in there for a while, they get really rusty and the nut on the end just shears off, so you're going to need new ones anyway. These were just replaced. I just installed this mid-pipe, so these are decent enough. We're going to reuse these. And also you're going to want to pick up a new donut gasket to go in here. And normally I would have picked up one anyway for this job. It just slipped my mind, but this hasn't been in there very long at all, so this donut gasket should be fine to reuse. And next we'll go ahead and remove these 3 nuts that secure the mid-pipe to the manifold. One thing I forgot to do, in order to have easy access to get to this top nut here, it's not impossible to get to in this configuration, but we're going to have to remove this little splash guard anyway. This is what I was talking about on these vehicles where they just have these 2 side splash guards. I'm going to go ahead and remove this right now without moving the camera. When we remove the other side, I'll show you how that one comes down because it's exactly identical to this side, just mirrored for the driver's side. then lastly, we'll go ahead and remove this 14mm bolt that secures the mid-pipe to the hanger. And then we can go ahead and remove the mid-pipe. All right, and as you saw, we already removed the splash guard over here. I didn't really show it very clearly in detail though. So like I said, I'll show you how. It's just a 12mm bolt right here, a push clip right here, and then up in the wheel well, right up here, there's another push clip, and then that whole thing comes down super easy. And one thing we want to do before we drop this manifold down, it's just kind of a smart thing to do, is we're going to crack these oxygen sensors loose. They can be in there really, really good sometimes, and once the manifold's off, sometimes it's really hard to get a good enough grip on the manifold and try to break those free at the same time. So while it's fixed in place here, bolted to the motor, we'll just get these broke free. Your connectors will be affixed a lot nicer in your configuration if you haven't messed with it. You'll see here I have to cut a zip tie on mine to get them down. That was just because that aftermarket manifold I was running, the position of those oxygen sensors was a little bit off, and so I had to kind of modify where these connectors sit. But as far as unclipping them, it'll be exactly the same for your Forester. And I'm just using a 22mm wrench here. So with those cracked free, we can go ahead and start unbolting these flanges. There's 3 bolts on each. I know my autofocus probably isn't gonna work right here, but there's one right there. You've got one right there, and then you've got one finally over here, and it's mirrored exactly the same on this side. All right, so now we'll go ahead and swap our old sensors to the new manifold. Now, if you had original sensors on there or old sensors, obviously this is something where you'd want to go ahead and get new sensors put in there. But this downstream sensor has less than about 20,000 miles on it, and this upstream sensor is only about 4 weeks old. I had changed this one out a bit ago to try to see if maybe that was the problem, and then just recently I had changed this one out again as a last resort before spending the $950 to see if this was the problem, and unfortunately it didn't fix it. If you do go ahead and reuse sensors, these do have a crush washer on there, so essentially they are a one-time use. So what I like to do is to take this ultra copper RTV. For those of you worrying, this is oxygen sensor safe RTV, and just a very light amount placed here on the mating surfaces just to give these sensors a seal and avoid any unwanted exhaust leak noise. And then what I like to do is prep the exhaust manifold gaskets. I like to use this Mal brand only because these are readily available near me, and they are a OE construction using a multi-layer steel manifold gasket. And as I've mentioned many times on the channel before, I really can't say enough about this ultra copper. You don't need a whole ton of it. I'm not saying you got to slather on half a tube, but just put a thin layer on your gaskets. It really is just that insurance that you're going to get a good seal and have no noisy exhaust leaks after you're done. And so what I do with these is I'll smear some on one side, I'll smear some on the other side, I'll go up under the engine, slide it over the studs, and use that RTV to stick it to the engine. It really makes things handy when you're working by yourself, not trying to line the gaskets up on the manifold and they're wanting to slip around as you're trying to fit it over the studs. So that's what we're gonna do. Get the RTV on there, stick it to the heads on the engine, then we'll get our manifold up there. Now we can go ahead and fit that new manifold right up into place. And all I've done is just real lightly snug those nuts down with the impact. I'll come back through off camera with a torque wrench and we'll torque those down to around 22 to 25 foot-pounds. All right, and now I've already gone ahead and pre-installed a OEM multi-layer steel gasket here to go to the mid-pipe, and we are ready to get that mid-pipe back up and reinstalled. And lastly, we can go ahead and hook up our oxygen sensors. All right, so I went and did just a quick mock-up of that splash shield that I said I wanted to get installed here at the end. And it looks like it uses the vast majority of the pickup points that the other splash shields used. There is this rearward point right here, which is an unused hole here on the non-turbo Forester. And being that I live in a very rusty environment, all I did was take an M8 by 1.25 tap, and I've cleaned that hole up, and we'll grab a spare bolt and we'll use that to grab the back of the splash shield. But let me get it thrown up here, secured in place, and I'll show you how that goes up and how it fits. All right, so that actually fits surprisingly well considering that this is not an OEM splash shield. It's an aftermarket reproduction piece of what the exact same thing would be. Usually there are slight variations just in whatever mold they use or whatever, but it went up really nice. You can see here in the front, it used the same two 12mm bolt pickup points here. The only thing that differs, you can see this is where the other push pin went in on the other ones, and you have kind of a hole right here. I'm assuming that maybe the bumper must be a little bit different on the turbo models. And I was gonna maybe run a zip tie there, but this is actually really, really sturdy. The entire thing actually is surprisingly more sturdy than I thought it was gonna be. So I'm not even gonna worry about that. It picked up the exact same points up here in the wheel well for the sides. And then here in the rear, you can see that bolt that I was talking about. We chased the threads for, added there. It's got these little clips here that help hold it in place, clips up over this jacking plate here. You can see that on the turbo models, there must be something right about here. These look like clips to me that would clip over something, so I'm not sure exactly what's there on the turbo models. It looks like there's a little hole here on either side, possibly for a push pin as well. They might have a different subframe or something on the turbo models to accommodate for that. But we've got the cutout here for the drain plug. We obviously won't be using the oil filter access point here because our oil filter's in the engine bay with this FB25 engine. Not sure what this little access hole is for. It looks right up at the water pump pulley here on the FB25, so I'm not exactly sure what that's for. And so obviously there's got to be a reason why Subaru just didn't stick with this design for both the turbo EJs and the non-turbo FBs. The only thing that I can think of off the top of my head is with the turbo EJ engines, the catalytic converters wouldn't be till like back here on this pipe, so there would be no catalytic converter under here. So it's entirely possible that with that catalytic converter there, they may have been concerned about heat. Right now in the wintertime, that's not something I'm concerned about, but I will keep my eye on things and just make sure that heat doesn't seem to be a problem with buildup up underneath there in the summertime, but I won't be able to find that out until the weather warms up. But for now, I really like the idea that instead of the oil pan and everything right there just getting blasted by all the salty water spray here in the Northeast during the wintertime, I've got some protection there. Now, obviously, this isn't watertight. There are little holes that they put in it that are meant to drain water out and stuff like that, but I think it's going to do a much better job at keeping things from corroding quite as quickly. And so that's going to wrap this one up, guys. I really hope this video helps you out if you're considering changing out the catalytic converter manifold on your SH Forester with the FB25 engine, or if you were curious like I was if a turbo model splash shield will fit underneath of the non-turbo models. As always, guys, if you liked the video, be sure to hit that like button. Feel free to leave a comment below, and if you're not subscribed already, please consider subscribing. Thanks.